If someone married into your family 2 years ago, 2 years, and your parent dies, does that person deserve half of everything your grandparents built over 50 years? Because I said no. I said no out loud in a room full of people, and now apparently I'm the villain of the whole family story. So I'm asking you straight, was I wrong to do it? Okay, let me give you the actual picture. My mom, her name was Diane, she passed away 14 months ago. Ovarian cancer, fast and brutal, gone in about 7 months from diagnosis to the end. She was 61, and I was her only biological child, so the grief hit me in a way that's still kind of impossible to describe. But here's the layer underneath all of that. My mom had remarried 3 years before she got sick. His name is Roland. And Roland is, look, he's not a monster. He was kind to her. He made her laugh. I watched them together and I genuinely believed he loved her. I want to be clear about that because it matters for what comes next. He's not a bad person, but he is a person who married my mother when she was already 60, already had a fully formed life, and he moved into a house that my grandparents had helped her buy. House that sat inside a broader estate, accounts, property, some family jewelry that traced directly back to my grandparents on both sides. My grandmother Pearl passed 2 years before my mom did, and she'd left specific assets to Diane with the clear expectation, spoken out loud at the kitchen table more than once, that those things would eventually come to me. That was the understanding. Not written perfectly in every document, and yes, that's where this gets complicated, but understood. Clearly understood by everyone, except it turns out Roland. My mom's will was not updated after she and Roland married. She always meant to get to it, she was 61, she wasn't thinking about dying, and so when she passed, the default inheritance laws in our state kicked in, which meant Roland, as her spouse, had a significant legal claim, and he exercised it. Within 6 weeks of her funeral, he had an attorney. 6 weeks. I found out through my Aunt Lorraine, who called me in a panic saying Roland was asking about the accounts, about the deed, about whether there was a separate trust for the jewelry my grandmother had left. There wasn't a clean trust. There were letters, conversations, a handwritten note from my grandmother that said, and I have this, I kept it, these pieces belong to the women in this line. I confronted Roland directly. I called him and I said, Roland, I need to understand what you're doing. And he said, I wrote this down because I knew I'd need to remember it. He said, Sweetheart, I was her husband. I took care of her through the hardest thing either of us ever faced. I'm not just going to walk away with nothing. And I said, Nobody is asking you to walk away with nothing, but my grandmother's jewelry and the house contributions, those weren't Diane's alone to pass on. And he said, The law disagrees with you. And that was it. That was the moment I decided to fight. I hired my own attorney, and my attorney found something, a transfer on death beneficiary designation on one of the larger accounts, an account that had originated from my grandmother's estate that named me. Roland's attorney had somehow not flagged it, or was hoping I wouldn't find it. When we surfaced that document, I also pushed hard to have the jewelry categorized as inherited property rather than marital property, which in our state carries different treatment. My attorney believed we could make that case. Roland's attorney called mine and said that if I pursued this, Roland would contest the entire estate and it would drag on for years. My attorney told me it was my call, so I made the call. I told my attorney to go ahead. I filed. And then I called Roland myself because I thought he deserved to hear it from me, and I told him I was protecting what my grandmother intended. He didn't yell. He just said very quietly, Your mother would be ashamed of you. And I hung up. Here's the part where I have to be honest about what I actually did. The transfer on death account, that was clean, that was documented, I felt solid there. But the jewelry and the house argument? My attorney said strong case, not guaranteed case. I pursued it anyway, knowing it could tie Roland up in legal fees for a long time, knowing that even if he had some valid claim, I was using every tool available to reduce what he'd walk away with. And I did it deliberately. My Aunt Lorraine, who had been on my side for most of this, sat across from me at her kitchen table about 2 months into the process and said, I think your grandmother would have wanted this resolved, not weaponized. And I said, she would have wanted her things to stay in the family. And Lorraine said, he was family. Diane made him family. That hit me. I didn't let her see that it hit me, but it did. My cousin Bree stopped returning my calls around the same time. I heard through Lorraine that Bree had said I was using grief as a weapon, which, I mean, that stung in a specific way, because I don't think that's what I was doing. But I also can't swear it isn't. The thing is, Roland had 2 adult kids from a previous marriage who were fully financially independent. He owned his own condo before he married my mom. He wasn't destitute. He wasn't going to be left with nothing even if I won on every point. But he also sat with my mother through every chemo appointment. He slept in a hospital recliner for the last 3 weeks of her life. I know that, I was there. A few weeks after Lorraine and I had that conversation, Roland sent me a text, just one that said, I don't want her things. I want to not be erased from her life like I didn't matter. That's what this feels like. I read it 4 times. I didn't respond. I still haven't responded. The legal process is still ongoing. The transfer on death account was settled in my favor. That part's done. The jewelry and the house argument are still being negotiated. And honestly, my attorney now thinks we'll probably land on a partial settlement. Not everything I pushed for. Not nothing. Roland's still in that space between, legally, emotionally, all of it. And I'm in this weird limbo where I feel like I did exactly what my grandmother would have wanted, and also like I might have done something she'd be quietly disappointed in, too, because she also loved my mother. And my mother chose Roland. And Roland sent me that text that I still haven't answered. So here it is. I protected my family's legacy. I used every legal tool I had. I may have dragged a grieving widower through a process that cost him more than money. And I genuinely do not know, sitting here right now, if I'm the daughter my grandmother would be proud of, or just the one who won. So, am I the problem? Honestly, though, what would you have done? Comment below.